Alright, hey everyone, welcome to Dialogue. Tyler again here. Today I'm here with Philip Pattison, who has an organization called Foster the Bay, who's been doing incredible work here in the Bay Area. So, Mr. Pattison, please tell me a nutshell about your mission of Foster the Bay.
Okay. So Foster the Bay is a coalition of churches in the Bay Area, and we are committed to providing loving homes for every kid in foster care in all 11 counties of the Bay Area.
Awesome. How long have you guys been around?
So we launched in the fall of 2015. It started really in the spring of 2015. I was pastoring a church in South San Jose, and my wife and I had just become foster parents. Our hearts just broke for these kids who had been removed from their homes because of abuse or neglect. And as we were engaging these kids who were in these really difficult times in their life, our hearts just broke, and we thought, hey, let's invite our whole church to get engaged. And so we did that. We shared the vision with the church to say, hey, there's kids in our cities that are going through a really difficult time and need loving homes. And so we invited our little church to get involved. The church about 100 people. Mm-hmm. And so the Santa Clara County got word of what our church was doing, and a social worker reached out to us and said, hey, we love what you guys are doing. We think we want to support it and we encourage it. But the fact is, the crisis, they said, is bigger than your little church. And she said, are there other churches in the area that would want to do the very same thing? She said, do you guys think that you guys could develop like a faith alliance among churches? She said, could you guys help us rally other churches? And so that was the spring of 2015, and we decided to say yes to her. And so in the fall of 2015, we started mobilizing other churches.
Very cool. From what I can tell, it seems to be very successful. Has it met or exceeded your own expectations with how it's grown so much? And just to share with your audience, if you don't mind, how much growth have you experienced?
Yeah, it's definitely exceeded expectations. We weren't sure how the church was going to respond when we started meeting with pastors, but what started with our one little church in 2015 has now grown. We've now seen, I think it's 32 churches to date, about 2.5 years later, 32 churches that have invited their communities to get engaged. And so as a result of that, what we want to do is when we connect with a local church, we want to help them to raise up at least one foster family with 4 support friends. That's kind of our mission with each church. So even big churches, small churches, in those communities, we think there can be at least one family. And then they have 4 support friends, people that really care deeply about these kids, but maybe don't have the capacity to open up their home, but they want to be a part of the solution. And so they come around and they wrap these foster families with babysitting or transportation or encouragement, or they drop off meals, but we help kind of wrap them around. And so from these families, we've now seen, I think it's 93 kids that have been placed in Foster the Bay homes.
Wow.
So
that's incredible. You mentioned your goal is at least one family per church.
Mm-hmm.
How many churches are left? Do you know the stats on how many churches are here versus maybe how many foster children there are in the Bay Area needed?
So that's a great question. There are in the Bay Area, there are over 7,000 children in foster care, and it depends on how you measure, or which churches. You could go in a phone book, or you can Google which churches. Some of those churches aren't around anymore. But there are thousands and thousands of churches. With some of the organizations that we've partnered with, and we've been trying to actually look into that. There's already verified 3,500 churches in the Bay Area. There's probably closer to 6,000 or 7,000. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. That's why we say if every church raises up just one foster family with 4 support friends, there's more than enough to be able to meet the need. Actually, one of our big mantras, we say it all the time, is that one day we want to see a waiting list of families rather than a waiting list of kids in need of a home. And we're going to keep pushing forward until we see that happen.
Great. So what's your process like? You mentioned that you started by starting with your own church and then building an alliance around that. How are you continuing to grow those numbers?
I think a lot of churches have been quick to say yes because there's something deep within, like the DNA of our faith, that connects us with this specific cause or this specific mission. at the essence of my personal belief as a Christian is the belief that when I was personally hurting and broken and feeling alone, and because of all the wounds from my past and the scars from my past, I felt like I had no hope for my future. And when I was at this really low and dark place, that God made a way for me to be brought into his family. And it cost him a great deal to do that. And in light of what God has done for me to bring me into his family, surely I can do the same for someone else. Mm-hmm. And that's really the essence of the Christian faith. And so with that being said, when we talk with church leaders and pastors, and we help folks understand, like, man, this idea of family and the father like heart of God, when we realize that, and we then are called to reflect that in the world around us, we say we can show that love that God showed to us, like we can show that same love to others.
Yeah, that's a layup for anyone who takes it really their faith really seriously. And as if you're dealing with the pastors and stuff, you have definitely vulnerability is a great tool in that. So with your own vulnerability in that, are you opening up everything to every pastor you ever speak to about this, or is it just a little bit at a time?
As a personal vulnerability?
Personal vulnerability.
You know, yeah, to varying degrees. I mean, everybody's messed up. You know, everybody's gone through difficult times, and I think everybody, Christian or not. I mean, people outside of the faith. Every one of us understand that we need love, and that we were designed for relationship. That, in specifically in the foster care world, that kids belong in families.
Yeah.
And that's what we all long for, is that like deep, loving relationship. And sometimes, and so I think everybody resonates with that piece of it, and that real longing. As far as a personal, like my own personal story, you know, I'll share about like the places where I've been and what God has kind of rescued me out of at times. But it all depends on the context and so on. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not prying here, but we've known each other for a few years now. Yeah, and I am a little aware of your personal testimony. But one thing I do find very inspiring is you have a long history of helping churches plant, and it is you did go through some transition personally. You went from doing that all over the place to pastoring your own church to now starting your own huge organization, tremendously successful, Foster the Bay. At what point did I almost want to say, it's hard to ask, but what point did you find yourself closest to God?
Yeah, well,
I hate these curveballs.
No, I love it. That's good. You know, it really did. I mean, as far as my personal story, there was a time when I think I was at my closest to God. I mean, there are various times. Yeah. So sometimes when you're in the mountains, you feel like there's this great connection with God, and it's also sometimes in the valleys, when all hope seems lost, and then you feel that hand that reaches up and pulls you out. Right. There's like this overwhelming sense of gratitude and joy that's kind of funny to feel in a valley, but it's possible. And so some of those, probably one of the most stark, meaningful, dynamic times I've had with God was in one of those valleys. You kind of referenced my story, and I do share the story with folks that there was a season of my life where I had run after a lot of things that just didn't really satisfy me, things that I thought would kind of fulfill that longing within me, from career to women to a whole bunch of things. And it got me to the point, I was married at the time, and it got me to a point where my marriage fell apart. My wife and I separated. These things that I was running after that I thought would bring me the most joy absolutely destroyed my life. Absolutely. This was years ago. And ended up coming to a point where my wife and I, it's kind of things came to a head. We separated, and we spent months separated, but really years actually healing from that. And it was at that moment when things kind of came to a head with my wife, and I felt like things were most hopeless, where again, like I felt like this tangible presence of God, where I felt like I didn't have to hold on to those things on my own anymore. And like all those things that I had been running after, everything came kind of crashing down, and all that was left, I didn't have a career anymore, I didn't have certain relationships anymore. Everybody around me knew what I was going through. My reputation came crumbling down. Really, everything was stripped bare except my relationship with God. And then I realized the one thing that I had been kind of running from was the one thing that I absolutely needed, and the one thing that was going to satisfy. And so it was when I had absolutely nothing. No favor from the people around me, no good relationship, no career path, this ladder that I had been climbing, I just came toppling down from. This was 8 years ago. And even my marriage, my son, being separated from my son. In the midst of the chaos, like there was it wasn't that I had peace necessarily, but it was like I began to see hope. And so I ran headlong towards God, and ultimately it did bring me the peace, and it did heal my marriage. And 2 years later, we slowly began not just to have a healthy marriage and a healthy family, but I began serving in volunteer capacities in these different ways, and again we ultimately started pastoring a church again and launching this nonprofit. And but that was probably one of the most meaningful times for me.
Well, that's very deep. And certainly, I always, when I don't ask that question often, but every time I have, it has been in a valley, not on a peak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way it works. Is your personal relationship with God and how you were in this valley, is that continual inspiration for your work in Foster the Bay? And also, is that why you're also going after churches with that? Because in my opinion, the best people to foster children are people of faith. I just wanted to hear you illuminate some of your perspective on that.
So the answer is kind of twofold. In one sense, yes. And in one sense, it's a little bit different. I'll say the piece that's a little bit different first. It's a little bit different in that, I'll say this. Yes, in that God showed me compassion. When I was hurting, He showed me tremendous compassion and brought me deeper into His family than ever before. The reason why it's a little bit different is that for me, my brokenness and where I was, that was self-inflicted. Like that was because of my decisions. And so the pain that I was experiencing was not because I was just like a victim to my circumstances. It was because I brought myself to that place. Children in foster care are victims. And almost always they have biological families that love them deeply and care about them. And sometimes are going through difficult times. Sometimes they've made some mistakes. Sometimes for whatever their reason. But I can say children in foster care are not there because it's been self-inflicted. It's because they have been victims of some kind of circumstance, some kind of trauma that the county or the state has had to take them out of the home for a season until their family is ready to care for them again. And so in that sense, a little bit different. But really at the core, if you can get past that, really at the core so you asked me, is that why we go after churches? Absolutely. Again, at the essence of the Christian faith is the belief that when I was in need, God showed me compassion. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds of children in Santa Clara County, hundreds and hundreds in San Francisco County. I mean, you can just keep it. There's thousands of kids in the Bay Area that are in deep, deep need of some love and compassion, a place to have stability, a place to heal, a place to have some hope for their future. And the church better be leading the way in helping to show that for those kids.
Okay, cool. That made your position very clear. Before we go, I'd like for you at least to share with our audience, what are your short-term goals and how can they, and long-term goals if you'd like to share,
Sure.
how can those in our audience support you?
That's great. Long term, we want to see the faith community mobilized in every county in the Bay Area. That means hundreds of churches all across the Bay Area that are calling their communities to get engaged as foster families or support friends. And again, long term, we want to see we want to see a waiting list of families. We want to raise up enough families until there are more than enough to meet the need. That's our long term goal. And the short term, we've just launched in San Francisco County. We've seen half a dozen churches that have just begun casting that vision to their communities. And then we're on our way north. We're heading up to Marin County next, and so we're already starting to meet with churches, with the county agencies there, and so those are our goals, is working in San Francisco and Marin County, and so that would make a total of 4 counties that we'll be in right now, and then just continue to kind of spread out as we go over the years to come.
Okay, cool. How can our audience support you?
Yeah, so you can go to fosterthebay.org.
Yep.
And at fosterbay.org, you'll find, if you know church leaders, pastors that would want to get their churches involved, you can connect with us through the website. If you personally want to become a foster family or a support friend, you can also attend what we call an interest meeting. It's just this no commitment, it's informational. We'll just share a bit about the vision, some of the roles that you can play and ways to get involved. And there'll be lots of time for Q&A. So a lot of people come with questions about foster care and what it would look like. There's plenty of time for that. So we have interest meetings that happen all over the Bay Area all the time. We've got multiple meetings every month. So they can attend that, or people can give. We're run completely by private donation. And so so if people want to contribute, they can do that as well.
Okay. Well, everybody, that was Philip Pattison. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for taking the time. Not a problem. And like he said, fosterthebay.org if you'd like to donate or become a foster parent, or to become a friend of a
Support friend.
Support friend of a foster parent. Thanks for watching this episode of Dialogue, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.
To foster together.
And as you speak, 100 billion guys.
We know that it takes a village to raise a child. And so that's why we're here tonight, because we know that together we can make a huge difference in the lives of many children right here in our own front yard.
The stars are made to worship so alive.
Many of you know the story, but a few years ago, a social worker from Santa Clara County approached us and asked, would you guys consider spearheading a faith alliance of churches to help us address a growing crisis in the foster system here in the Bay Area? We said yes. We launched an initiative that we call Foster the Bay. And over the last 2.5 years, by the grace of God, we've seen this faith alliance now grow to 30 churches. And again, but from these 30 churches that we've begun to partner with that are casting vision to their communities, we've now seen 250 families get engaged, either as foster parents or as support friends to those foster parents.
You don't speak in vain, a syllable empty your voice.
We want to see every church in the Bay Area raise up at least one foster family with a team of 4 support friends. If we do that, we will make sure there will be a waiting list of families in the Bay Area rather than a waiting list of kids in need of a home. Honestly, if even a fraction of the churches in the Bay Area raise up one foster family and 4 support friends, that's all we'll need. There are 7,000 kids in foster care in the Bay Area today, and every one of these kids deserve a loving, stable home. 7,000 is a huge, huge number. And when you hear a big number like that, it's easy to kind of like hold that at a distance, to hold it at arm's length. But the reality is, those are 7,000 kids with 7,000 names and 7,000 stories. And every one of their stories matters to God. Because their stories matter to God, their stories matter to us. So we call it Foster the Bay for a reason. Many of you know this. So we have a dream of being across every county in the Bay Area to see this coalition of churches expand, so again, to see that waiting list of families.
Still obeys your So